The research team died screaming, and the audio logs caught every second of it. It started with someone shouting orders about sealing the door, then the deafening crash of metal folding like cardboard, then the gunfire. Desperate, uneven, cut off by wet crunches, and that one last human voice begging for help before the signal turned into static. Earth Command replayed it 3 times in the briefing room. No one breathed during the first 2. By the third, the generals exchanged looks that said this wasn't a rescue mission anymore. It was cleanup. Captain Ron McAllister sat in the back of the room, leaning on his chair as if he had accidentally walked into a meeting about tax returns instead of a massacre. He had that calm look commanders hate because it suggests the soldier might be smarter than them. His left arm was half metal from the shoulder down thanks to a battle with something with too many teeth, and he used it to open a soda during the playback like he was watching a bad movie. When the last scream faded, he muttered loud enough for everyone to hear, "That guy owed me 20 credits." The room stayed silent for a second longer before a couple of soldiers snorted. One choked on his coffee. Across the table, General Hartwell looked like a man allergic to humor. He snapped his fingers at the projector tech, who killed the audio. Hartwell's voice was gravel-wrapped in authority. Kepler 91C, Outer Colony Research Outpost. Population 42. Now 0. Cause of death unknown. He paused for effect, as if the obvious hadn't been burned into everyone's brain by the screaming 5 minutes ago. Private Kim, barely old enough to buy his own drinks, raised a hand. Unknown? Because it sounded pretty known to me. Like something big chewed them up. Maybe lots of somethings. General Hartwell ignored him, eyes scanning the rest of the unit. We are sending in a recovery team at dawn. Retrieve survivors if any. Secure all research data. Evaluate the threat. His jaw tightened. If necessary, eliminate it. Sergeant Vega, sniper, chronic pessimist, and holder of the unofficial record for most disciplinary notes about sarcasm, leaned back in his chair. Eliminate what? He gestured vaguely. Ghosts? Aliens? A plague of space bunnies? The general didn't blink. Whatever took out 42 people in less than 3 minutes. That shut Vega up for almost 8 seconds, a personal best. Then he muttered, 42 armed people. With walls. And guns. And doors. The rookie medic, Private Diaz, tried to help. Maybe they just had a gas leak. My uncle's kitchen exploded once. Burned the whole house down. Vega gave him a look. Did the gas leak also leave claw marks? Hartwell snapped, enough. You leave at dawn. Dismissed. As the soldiers filed out, McAllister caught the tail end of 2 aides whispering about Project Chimera and words like containment breach and liability risk. That made him frown. Soldiers hear those words right before things go bad enough to make history books. Back in the hangar, the squad gathered around their dropship, an angular beast patched with enough armor to suggest someone expected it to be shot at. Vega cleaned his rifle with the air of a man preparing for his own funeral. Private Kim triple-checked his drone controls like they were holy relics. Diaz paced nervously until McAllister told him to stop before he wore a hole in the deck. What do you think we're walking into, Cap? Vega asked finally. McAllister stared at the briefing packet like it was written in a foreign language, then shrugged. Best case? Angry locals with bad manners. Worst case? Something hungry enough to bite through steel. Diaz went pale. That's the worst case? Vega snorted. Kid, the worst case is always us not getting paid. Private Kim glanced up from his tablet. Actually, the worst case is command lying about everything and us flying straight into a death trap because some guy in a suit wants deniability. Everyone went quiet for a moment because Kim had accidentally spoken out loud what they were all thinking. When dawn hit, the dropship roared off the launch pad, streaking toward the pale green planet turning slowly below. McAllister watched Earth shrink behind them until it was just another cold star. He didn't like missions with words like unknown threat or secure all evidence. Those missions ended with medals for generals and funerals for everyone else. Halfway through the descent, Command sent one last packet of data, satellite images of the research outpost ruins. Scorched walls. Cratered ground. Something that might have been a body if bodies came in pieces that large. And in the fog beyond the perimeter, faint heat signatures. How big are those? Vega asked, squinting at the thermal map. Private Kim did some calculations on his tablet. Big. Like, should not be walking on two legs big. Diaz muttered a prayer. McAllister leaned back in his seat as the ship rattled through the atmosphere, heat shields blazing. Nobody talked after that. When the landing gear finally hit dirt with a bone-shaking thud, the entire planet felt wrong. The air shimmered with green mist. The trees had too many branches in the wrong places. The wind carried faint, metallic screams that might have been distant storms or might not. Private Kim checked his sensors. No radio signals. No power readings. Just static. Like the whole planet's jamming us. Vega locked and loaded his rifle. Fantastic. Nothing says fun like landing blind in monster country. They moved toward the burnout research facility in tight formation, weapons ready. Every wall was scorched black. Something had torn the main gate open from the inside. Inside, the floor was slick with something dark. Not all of it was blood. Diaz knelt, scanning it. Not human. Wrong cell structure. The black box from the command center still blinked faintly. Kim yanked it out, hooking it to his tablet. The recovered audio crackled to life. Gunfire, screaming, then a strange, guttural voice speaking words no one recognized right before the line went dead. Then movement flickered at the edge of McAllister's vision. Vega swung his rifle toward the shadows beyond the fence. Thermal scope lit up with shapes. Human shapes. Moving slow. Watching them. Diaz whispered, "Survivors?" McAllister stared at the way the shapes moved. Too smooth. Too precise. "No," he said finally. "Not survivors." One of the shapes stepped into the light, and McAllister saw the Earth military insignia on its shoulder. Vega cursed under his breath. "We're not alone out here." And the thing wearing that insignia was smiling. The figure in the fog stood there for one long second too many, like it knew the exact amount of time to make everyone's nerves itch. Then it turned and vanished into the mist, not running, just walking like it had all the time in the world. Vega muttered something that sounded suspiciously like a prayer, followed by several words that probably weren't in any holy book. McAllister signaled the squad forward. They moved past the wrecked gate and into the compound where the research station had once been the pride of Earth's outer colonization program. Now it looked like someone had set off a war inside a scrapyard. The air smelled like burned metal and something else, sharp and bitter, like electricity frying hair. The walls bore the kind of damage that didn't make sense: plasma scoring in one direction, claw marks in another, and long grooves carved deep into the floor like something had been dragged away, something heavy. Diaz kept glancing at the marks, probably imagining what kind of creature left them, and what it used for teeth. Private Kim hunched over his tablet, replaying fragments of data from the black box. He adjusted his glasses the way nervous tech guys always do in movies right before they announce bad news. The last entry before the line went dead mentions subjects breaching containment. Plural. Multiple subjects. Then it cuts off. "Subjects," Vega said. "That's government talk for monsters, right?" McAllister didn't answer. He was staring at the perimeter walls where something had punched holes clean through steel panels. Whatever had done this hadn't cared about armor or doors. It had gone straight through like a hot knife through butter. They found the first body behind the admin block. Or what was left of it. The torso was missing. No blood though, not much anyway. Whatever killed them had cauterized as it went. Diaz turned pale. "This isn't natural," he whispered. Kim stopped poking at his tablet long enough to say, "No kidding, Doc. That's why we're here and not birdwatching on Mars." McAllister signaled for them to keep moving. Every corner felt wrong, every corridor lined with scorch marks and shadows that twitched when the wind shifted. The main lab doors had been sealed from the inside, reinforced with emergency bars and then welded shut. Whatever got in had cut through all of it. Inside the lab they found overturned equipment, shattered tanks filled with green fluid, and shattered computers that still sparked feebly like they hadn't realized the apocalypse had already happened. One wall had equations scrawled in frantic handwriting that ended mid-formula with a long smear of what everyone hoped was just marker ink. Then Diaz froze. Someone had scrawled words in English too, over and over. We made them too smart. McAllister didn't like the sound of that. In the far corner, they heard faint scraping. Vega raised his rifle, but McAllister signaled him to hold. The scraping got louder, then a storage freezer door creaked open and a human face peeked out. She was pale, trembling, eyes darting everywhere like a trapped animal. Before anyone could speak, she stumbled out, clutching a lab coat around herself like armor. She saw the military patches on their uniforms and her expression collapsed into something between relief and terror. "You have to leave," she whispered. "Right now." McAllister stepped forward. "What happened here?" "They came back." Her voice cracked. "The ones who killed everyone. They weren't aliens. They were ours." Vega frowned. "Ours as in human?" She nodded, shaking. "Soldiers. Special unit. They came in the night after we refused to hand over the research. Executed half the staff before the others even knew what was happening. Then it got worse." Diaz asked carefully. "Worse how?" She just pointed toward the shattered tanks filled with green fluid. "They used this. They turned on the scientists who made it." Before McAllister could press for more answers, movement flashed across Vega's scope. Multiple heat signatures closing in through the fog. "Positions," McAllister snapped. The squad spread out, weapons up. Shapes moved beyond the fences again, too many to count, walking in strange, jerky patterns. Some carried rifles. Others didn't need them, judging by the size of their arms. Private Kim cursed softly as his tablet pinged, picking up chatter on an encrypted Earth military frequency. Vega snarled. "Fantastic. They're talking to each other." The survivor woman grabbed McAllister's sleeve. "You don't understand. Those soldiers, they're not exactly soldiers anymore." The first one stepped into the open, and this time they got a good look. It wore fragments of Earth combat armor, but the flesh beneath was wrong, stretched tight over too much muscle, veins glowing faintly green like something alive pulsed inside. Its eyes glowed the same color. Diaz whispered, "Oh holy hell." Vega raised his rifle. "Orders, Cap?" McAllister stared at the thing as more stepped into view behind it. They moved with human precision, but something about them screamed predator. Predators pretending to be men. The woman's voice cracked. "They call them chimeras. They're what happens when you cross human DNA with..." She trailed off, glancing at the shattered alien tanks. With that, Kim went pale. "The project files mentioned something about adaptive hybrids, but I thought it was theoretical." The chimeras stood there, silent, weapons lowered but eyes glowing. Then one of them smiled just enough to show teeth. McAllister didn't like the way the air went still. He signaled for the squad to back toward the admin block slowly. The lead chimera tilted its head like it was studying them. Then it spoke, voice distorted but clear enough. "Orders received. Eliminate witnesses." Vega muttered, "Yeah, that sounds about right." The chimeras raised their weapons as one. McAllister shouted, "Cover now," and the world erupted in gunfire. Bolts of plasma fire scorched the walls as the squad dove for cover. Diaz dragged the scientists behind an overturned table, while Vega returned fire with sharp, precise shots that barely slowed the creatures. McAllister lobbed a grenade toward the fence line, but one chimera caught it midair and hurled it back. They hit the dirt as the explosion tore a crater where they had been standing seconds ago. Kim shouted over the chaos, "We can't stay here. They'll pin us down." "No kidding," Vega growled, firing again. The chimeras advanced through the smoke, glowing eyes cutting through the haze. McAllister realized with a sinking feeling that they were being herded, driven somewhere, not just attacked. The survivor woman clutched his arm, eyes wild. "There's a shuttle in the east hangar. It's the only way off this rock. But you have to go now before they call in the rest." "Rest?" Vega demanded. "How many of these things are there?" She didn't answer. McAllister signaled the squad to fall back toward the hangar, laying down covering fire as they moved. The chimeras followed at a steady pace, not rushing, just tightening the noose. They reached the edge of the compound as the sun broke through the green fog, casting long shadows over the ruins. For the first time McAllister saw the full scale of the devastation. The entire jungle beyond the fence moved. Shapes in the mist. Dozens. Maybe hundreds. Vega stared. "Oh, we are so screwed." McAllister checked his rifle, jaw tight. "Not yet." And then the jungle screamed. The sound that rose from the jungle was not anything human voices should have been able to make. It began like metal tearing, then deepened into a roar that shook the ground under their boots. Birds scattered overhead in chaotic bursts of color before vanishing into the mist. The squad froze for half a second too long, staring at the tree line where the fog boiled like something enormous was moving through it. Then McAllister snapped them into motion with a single word. "Move." They bolted across the compound toward the east hangar while the survivor woman clung to Diaz like a lifeline. Behind them, the chimeras advanced at a steady pace, never breaking formation, firing bursts that hissed through the air close enough to make Vega swear creatively with every step. Plasma bolts hit walls and vehicles, turning metal into molten slag in seconds. One blast slammed into the wreck of a transport truck, flipping it end over end in a shower of sparks. The squad ducked through the chaos, hugging cover wherever they found it, until they reached the half-collapsed hangar doors. Inside, the place looked like someone had played catch with grenades. A shuttle squatted at the far end, its hull scorched but intact. McAllister waved Kim over while Vega and Diaz covered the door. Kim scrambled up the side panel and started swearing under his breath as he yanked open access ports. "Power cells are fried," he shouted. "Someone ripped out half the wiring. This thing is a paperweight." McAllister didn't have time to be surprised. "Can you fix it?" Kim yanked a mess of cables free, sparks showering around him. "If I get 30 minutes, maybe. If I get 60 seconds, it's going to explode with us inside." "Then you get 90, McAllister said, "because we're not staying here." Vega fired at the advancing chimeras, his rifle cracking like thunder. The creatures moved fast but precise, spreading out to flank the hangar. One vaulted over the wrecked truck with inhuman grace before Vega put a round through its head. It fell hard, but two more replaced it instantly. "They're hurting us," Vega muttered between shots. "Pushing us somewhere." "No kidding," Diaz said as he reloaded shakily. His hands trembled, but he kept firing, clipping one chimera in the leg. It stumbled but didn't fall. Its blood glowed faint green where it hit the dirt. McAllister ducked behind a crate as plasma fire sliced through the air above him. The survivor woman crouched beside him, clutching her lab coat tight. "They want the research," she said, voice shaking. "The files, the samples. They killed everyone when we refused to hand them over." McAllister kept his eyes on the advancing line. "And command sent us here anyway." She nodded miserably. "To bury the evidence. You weren't supposed to make it back either." McAllister didn't answer because there wasn't time and because deep down he already knew. From the jungle behind the chimeras came more movement. The mist swirled as something bigger forced its way through the trees. McAllister caught glimpses between trunks, a massive shape with too many limbs and glowing veins like the others but scaled up to nightmare size. It moved on all fours, then on two legs, shifting like it couldn't decide which it preferred. Vega saw it too and muttered, "That thing needs its own zip code." Kim cursed from inside the shuttle where sparks kept flying. 90 seconds? He shouted. "Try 300. Maybe 400. "You've got 60, McAllister snapped. The chimeras opened up with full suppressive fire, pinning the squad behind crates and burned out vehicles. Plasma bolts chewed through metal like it was wet paper. Diaz screamed as one blast grazed his shoulder, searing armor and skin. He collapsed, but the survivor woman dragged him behind cover before the next volley hit. Vega fired until his rifle overheated, cursing loud enough to compete with the gunfire. Then the massive shape finally emerged from the tree line. It was twice the height of a man, armored plates growing straight out of flesh, face half human and half something out of a nightmare. It carried no weapon because it didn't need one. Its arms ended in claws long enough to make steel nervous. "What is that?" Diaz gasped, clutching his burned shoulder. The survivor woman went pale. "Alpha prototype. First of its kind. Strongest of them all." Vega muttered, "Of course it is. Because today wasn't already fun enough." Alpha roared and charged straight through its own troops, scattering them aside like they were nothing. It hit the hangar wall with enough force to bring the roof down in a rain of steel beams. McAllister shoved Diaz and the scientists clear as debris crashed around them. Kim screamed something about needing more time, but nobody could hear him over the sound of Alpha tearing through vehicles like toys. Vega emptied an entire magazine into it. The rounds punched holes in its flesh, but it didn't slow down. It swung one massive arm and sent a supply truck flying across the hangar like it weighed nothing. McAllister hurled a grenade under its feet. The explosion threw smoke and fire everywhere, but when it cleared, Alpha was still standing, glowing veins pulsing brighter now like the blast had only made it angry. "They're learning," the survivor woman shouted over the chaos. "Every time you hit them they adapt." "Terrific," Vega growled. "Next time let's fight something that gets dumber instead." Kim popped his head out of the shuttle, face streaked with sweat and grease. "I can get engines online, but navigation's fried. We take off blind or we stay here and die." "Your call, Cap." McAllister glanced at Alpha smashing its way toward them, at the line of chimeras tightening around the hangar, at Diaz bleeding on the floor and Vega cursing while he reloaded. He didn't need long to decide. "Get it running," he ordered. The squad fell back toward the shuttle while covering each other with bursts of gunfire. Alpha lunged, but McAllister triggered another grenade, slowing it just enough for them to scramble up the loading ramp. Vega sprayed the advancing chimeras until his rifle clicked empty, then hurled it straight into the face of the nearest one before diving inside. Kim slammed controls and the shuttle's engines screamed to life, spitting fire across the hangar floor. Alpha roared and leapt as the shuttle lurched forward, claws raking across the hull before it crashed back to the ground. The landing gear snapped free of the floor and the shuttle burst through the shattered hangar doors into the open air, climbing unevenly toward the clouds. Inside, sparks rained from the ceiling while warning lights painted everything red. Kim wrestled the controls like the shuttle was trying to buck him off. Vega laughed like a lunatic while reloading his sidearm, even though it wouldn't help against something that big. Diaz groaned through clenched teeth while the scientists tried to stop the bleeding. McAllister strapped himself in as the shuttle clawed for altitude. Below them the compound shrank, swarming with glowing shapes pouring out of the jungle. Alpha stood in the ruins staring up at them, eyes burning like it was memorizing their faces for later. Kim shouted over the alarms. "We're flying blind. No NAV, no comms, no clue where we're landing." McAllister watched the jungle stretching endless and dark in every direction. "Then we keep flying until something kills us or we find answers." Vega grinned without humor. "My money's on the first one." The shuttle vanished into the clouds while the jungle below screamed again, louder this time, like it was promising they wouldn't get far. The shuttle slammed through the clouds like it was falling apart midair. The hull rattled so hard that Vega yelled over the noise, asking if they should all just jump and take their chances with gravity. Kim ignored him, fighting the controls like he was wrestling a wild animal. The NAV system spat sparks and died completely, which meant they were flying blind over a planet that hated them. McAllister braced against the bulkhead as the shuttle screamed low over jagged cliffs and endless jungle before Kim finally managed to crash land it into what looked like a dry riverbed. The impact threw everyone around like dice in a cup before the ship ground to a halt in a cloud of dust and smoke. Silence followed except for Vega swearing about every bone in his body. Diaz groaned from the floor where the scientist was still trying to bandage his shoulder with strips of lab coat. Kim kicked the console in frustration. "We have no engines, no comms, and no way to call for pickup. Congratulations, we are officially the dumbest people alive." McAllister climbed out of the wreckage and scanned the treeline. The jungle loomed on all sides, thick and steaming and loud with alien insects. No sign yet of the chimeras or the monster Alpha, but that didn't make him feel any better. They had seen the way those things moved. Distance wouldn't save them for long. The scientist finally spoke, voice tight like she had been holding it in since the compound. My name is Dr. Elise Tran. I ran the genetics division at the research outpost before everything went to hell. She looked at McAllister, eyes hard. I know what those things are and what command sent you here to do. Vega snorted while checking his rifle. Let me guess. They told us rescue but really meant cover up. Dr. Tran nodded grimly. Project Chimera was supposed to create adaptive soldiers using alien DNA recovered from earlier expeditions. Faster, stronger, able to heal from almost anything. They wanted soldiers who could survive any environment, any war. The research team realized too late that the DNA changed more than bodies. It changed minds. Made them aggressive. Unpredictable. Kim muttered while yanking wires from the shuttle controls. Sounds like half the people I went to school with. Dr. Tran shook her head. We shut it down after the first prototypes showed signs of instability. That was when Command sent their Black Ops unit to seize everything. They called it a retrieval order. It was an execution. McAllister listened in silence while checking the tree line again. So the chimeras we saw were soldiers first. She nodded. The unit volunteered for enhancements. They thought they were getting strength and speed. Instead, they got something else growing inside them. Something alien. Vega spat into the dirt. And now Command wants them back like lost puppies. Dr. Tran hesitated before pulling a small data drive from her coat. This holds all the research logs. Everything about Project Chimera. Command can never get this. If they do, they will make more. McAllister took the drive slowly. Which means they will keep sending things after us until we are all dead. Before anyone could answer, a distant roar rolled across the jungle. Not Alpha this time, but several smaller voices answering like a hunting pack. The sound moved closer through the trees. Kim cursed while digging frantically through shuttle panels. I might be able to rig long-range comms using the emergency beacon, but it will take time. McAllister studied the sun dropping behind the cliffs. Time is something we do not have. As if to prove him right, the first plasma shot tore through the shuttle hull, sending everyone diving for cover. Chimeras burst from the tree-line, glowing eyes cutting through the smoke. Vega opened fire, immediately dropping 2 before they hit the dirt, but more kept coming fast and low like wolves circling prey. McAllister returned fire while yelling for Kim to grab whatever gear he could carry. Diaz dragged Dr. Tran toward the rocks while shooting one-handed with his sidearm. A chimera leapt from the wreckage straight at Vega, who emptied half a magazine into its chest before it finally crashed down inches away. Then the pack leader appeared. Taller than the others, with heavier armor fused straight into its skin. It carried a plasma cannon ripped from the outpost armory. One blast from that thing would turn their cover into glass. Vega swore like a poet while firing at its head. The rounds sparked off armor plating without slowing it down. The cannon powered up with a scream like a dying engine. McAllister hurled a smoke grenade to blind it while yelling for everyone to fall back into the canyon beyond the riverbed. Plasma fire turned the air into burning haze as they scrambled through the rocks. Dr. Tran stumbled beside him, gasping for breath. They will not stop. Command programmed obedience into the early units before the alien DNA overwhelmed it. All they have left is the last order they heard, which was kill everyone who saw the research, Vega shouted from ahead. Great job, Command really thought this one through. They reached a narrow pass between cliffs where boulders offered temporary cover. Vega dropped 2 more chimeras with precise shots before diving behind a rock as the plasma cannon vaporized the ground where he had been standing seconds earlier. Kim skidded in beside McAllister, clutching a mess of wires and the emergency beacon. I can boost the signal if I get to high ground. But Command will hear it too. McAllister reloaded calmly. Maybe we send them a message they will not like. The chimeras advanced through smoke and dust, relentless despite heavy fire. For every one they dropped, 2 more moved into position. Vega muttered about running out of ammo in languages nobody recognized. McAllister handed the data drive to Kim. Get it somewhere safe. Even if we do not make it. Kim stared at it wide-eyed. Me? I am the guy who faints when paper cuts bleed too much. You are the only one who can send it off-world, McAllister said flatly. The rest of US will hold them here. The canyon shook as the pack leader fired again, collapsing part of the cliff. Dust and rock rained down, forcing everyone deeper between the boulders. Dr. Tran clung to Diaz while Vega covered the flank with precise bursts. McAllister triggered the last 2 grenades, sending fire across the narrow path. The blast slowed the chimeras but did not stop them. Through the smoke he saw the pack leader stepping forward, armor glowing red from heat, but still intact. "We are running out of canyon," Vega shouted over the gunfire. McAllister looked at the sun sinking low across the jagged horizon, then at Kim scrambling up the rocks with the data drive clutched tight. "Hold the line," he said coldly. "Just hold it long enough." And then the pack leader roared, ordering the final charge. The canyon exploded into chaos as the chimeras surged forward like a tidal wave of claws and plasma fire. Vega dropped the first 2 through the smoke with quick headshots, but it barely slowed the rest. McAllister shouted orders over the roar as grenades boomed and dust filled the air thick enough to choke on. Diaz kept firing one-handed despite his shoulder wound, while Dr. Tran crouched low, clutching a rifle she barely knew how to use. The pack leader advanced through it, all glowing eyes locked on McAllister like it wanted him personally dead above everyone else. Kim scrambled higher up the rocks, clutching the data drive and the emergency beacon like both were made of glass. He shouted that he almost had the signal ready, but no one heard him over the sound of the plasma cannon tearing chunks out of the canyon walls. Every shot sent shards of stone raining down, forcing the squad to dive for cover again and again. McAllister hurled a flash bang into the charging chimeras, then used the momentary confusion to push the squad back toward a cluster of boulders near the canyon's edge. Vega fired until his rifle clicked empty, then switched to his sidearm, muttering insults with every shot. The man never ran out of sarcasm, even when he was running out of ammo. The pack leader finally reached the front line and McAllister met it head-on. The thing swung the plasma cannon like a club, forcing McAllister to dodge fast or get pulped into the canyon floor. He emptied half a magazine into its chest, but the armor fused to its skin absorbed most of it. The pack leader slammed him back against the rocks hard enough to knock the breath from his lungs before Diaz opened fire from the flank, drawing its attention away. Kim shouted from above that the signal was live and broadcasting. McAllister ducked another swing and yelled for him to send the data off-world while they still had time. Kim hesitated, saying the signal would reach command first before anyone else, but McAllister told him to send it anyway. Better the whole galaxy knows than just the people who caused this mess. The chimeras kept coming through smoke and gunfire like machines programmed only to kill. Vega laughed bitterly when one charged straight through his last grenade blast, missing an arm but still swinging a rifle like a club. Dr. Tran fired wildly, dropping one only because it was too close to miss. She looked horrified afterward but kept shooting because there was no choice. Then the sound of engines thundered overhead. Everyone looked up as a gunship streaked low across the canyon, firing missiles into the advancing chimeras. The explosions tore through the pack, scattering bodies and rock in every direction. Vega shouted something about reinforcements until he noticed the gunship wasn't aiming very carefully. The missiles were hitting everything, including the squad's position. McAllister cursed as the gunship circled for another pass. It was Earth military design painted with command insignia. Instead of dropping a rescue team, it unleashed another barrage across the canyon floor, forcing everyone to scatter. Vega screamed that they were trying to kill all witnesses at once, Chimera or not. The pack leader roared orders in a voice halfway between human and something else. The chimeras turned their fire on the gunship, while still closing in on the squad. Plasma bolts filled the sky as the gunship dodged and fired again, blowing apart more canyon walls. The whole place shook like it would collapse on top of everyone if the fight went on much longer. McAllister realized the gunship was about to level the entire canyon to bury all evidence, including them. He grabbed Diaz and Dr. Tran and ordered Vega to fall back toward a narrow ledge where they might escape before the next missile strike. Vega muttered that this was officially the worst rescue mission in history, but followed anyway, firing behind them as they ran. Kim finished transmitting the data drive contents before scrambling back down the rocks. He shouted that the files were gone out into the system where command could never erase them all. McAllister told him good, because it meant the mission was no longer about survival, but about making sure the truth stayed out there no matter who lived or died. The pack leader charged through another missile blast, this time clearly aiming for the gunship above rather than the squad below. It hurled the ruined plasma cannon like a spear straight through one of the gunship's engines. Fire erupted from the stricken craft as it spun out of control, slamming into the canyon floor in a thunder of metal and flame. The crash scattered both chimeras and soldiers alike. McAllister used the chaos to push the squad toward the far side of the canyon. Dr. Tran stumbled on the rocks, but Diaz dragged her upright with his good arm, refusing to leave her behind. Vega covered the retreat until one chimera slammed into him from the side. They went down in a brutal tangle of claws and knives. McAllister tried to reach him, but Vega emptied his sidearm point blank into the creature's skull, then triggered a grenade at his own belt. The explosion blew both of them apart, blocking the path behind with fire and debris. The rest of the squad escaped through the smoke, while McAllister stared back at the flames, knowing Vega had just saved their lives at the cost of his own. They scrambled up the far slope as the surviving chimeras regrouped around the wrecked gunship. Some turned toward the squad again, but others began dragging bodies and equipment from the crash as if following some other priority. McAllister realized Command's kill team had been on that gunship along with enough weapons to wipe out half the planet. The chimeras clearly wanted all of it. Kim swore as he looked back at the wreckage. If they get those weapons running, we are done. McAllister knew it too. Alpha was probably already on its way, and now the surviving chimeras had an arsenal falling out of the sky at their feet. He looked at the thin smoke trail from the emergency beacon still transmitting into orbit where any listening station could hear it. The whole planet was about to light up like a bonfire, drawing attention from every side. Dr. Tran said quietly that there were more prototypes deeper in the research tunnels beneath the mountains beyond the canyon. If the chimeras reached them before anyone else did, the situation would go from bad to impossible. McAllister checked ammo supplies, what little they had left, then looked at the exhausted faces around him. Kim breathing hard, clutching the broken transmitter. Diaz pale from blood loss, but still holding his rifle steady. Dr. Tran shaking but determined. He told them the mission wasn't over until the last piece of Project Chimera was gone. Command wanted control. The chimeras wanted war. But the squad had the only thing either side feared: proof of what really happened. Another distant roar rolled across the sky, deeper than thunder, carrying fury in every note. Alpha was coming. The jungle itself seemed to shiver at the sound. McAllister led the survivors toward the mountains, knowing the next fight would decide more than just who lived through the night. The mountains rose like jagged teeth against the red glow of the setting sun as McAllister pushed the squad forward through the narrow passes. The air thinned and the wind cut colder here, carrying the faint metallic stench of the wrecked gunship behind them. Somewhere below in the canyon, the surviving chimeras were arming themselves with whatever weapons had not been destroyed in the crash. Command's kill team was gone, but their guns and armor now belonged to creatures who learned too quickly how to use them. Every step up the rocky slope felt like a countdown towards something worse waiting ahead. Dr. Tran guided them toward a hidden access tunnel carved into the cliffs when the research station had been first built. She said it led into the underground labs where the earliest Chimera experiments had been stored before everything was moved to the main facility. If Alpha or the others reached those labs, they would find the prototypes sealed there, and everything needed to make more. McAllister understood now why Command wanted this planet burned clean. The disaster here could spread 1,000 times worse if it reached the rest of the colonies. Kim limped behind them, carrying the cracked emergency transmitter like it was a relic. He had managed to keep the signal alive long enough to broadcast the research data, but now it only spat static. Whoever heard it first would decide whether they were rescuers or executioners. Diaz stumbled once on the rocks, his face pale from blood loss, but waved off help with his good arm. He still carried his rifle steady, scanning the ridges above as if sheer stubbornness kept him moving. McAllister knew the kid should have been unconscious hours ago, yet somehow he kept walking like he refused to die before the mission was done. They reached the tunnel entrance as night finally swallowed the peaks. Kim powered the door with a field generator sparking like fireworks until the heavy metal slab groaned open. The air that rushed out smelled of dust and chemicals and something older beneath both. Inside, the lights flickered weakly over rows of shattered tanks lining the walls. Some still held dark shapes floating in viscous fluid, while others had been smashed open from the inside long ago. The floor was littered with papers and broken instruments left behind when the research team abandoned the site years earlier. Dr. Tran moved quickly through the wreckage to a control station at the far end. She powered it with trembling hands, bringing ancient monitors to life. Schematics flickered up, showing lower levels sealed off behind blast doors. "That is where the prototypes are," she said. "We meant to destroy them when the project was shut down, but Command ordered them preserved for later study." McAllister stared at the glowing map while checking his rifle. "Then we finish what you started." Before anyone could answer, the tunnel shook with a deep impact. Dust rained from the ceiling as another roar rolled through the mountains, louder than before. Alpha had found them. Vega's absence hung heavy in the silence that followed. No one said it, but McAllister knew the sniper would have had some bitter joke ready about dying in a dark hole on a hostile planet. Instead, there was only the wind outside, carrying the sound of something enormous climbing the cliffs toward them. Dr. Tran worked fast, overriding security locks on the lower levels. She said the prototypes had to be incinerated manually from the core chamber below because the automated systems had failed years ago. Kim muttered about how convenient that was while checking power cells on his drone for the 100th time. The first blast door groaned open just as plasma fire lit up the entrance tunnel behind them. Chimeras poured through the smoke, weapons scavenged from the wrecked gunship blazing bright in the dark. McAllister ordered the squad to hold the upper corridor, while Dr. Tran and Kim sprinted for the core chamber controls below. Diaz covered them with single precise shots, his face white with pain but his aim steady as stone. The pack leader forced its way through the gunfire, armor dented and scorched but still moving like a machine that refused to break. Behind it, Alpha crawled into the tunnel on all fours, glowing veins casting sick light across the walls. The thing filled the entire passage, shoulders scraping metal as it moved upright, unfolding to its full monstrous height. McAllister emptied his rifle into it while falling back toward the core chamber doors. Alpha barely slowed. It swung, one massive arm tearing through ceiling pipes in a storm of steam and sparks that turned the whole corridor into a furnace. Kim shouted from below that the incineration sequence was primed, but someone had to stay behind to trigger it manually because of course there was no remote option. The blast doors had to be sealed from this side before the core burned everything inside to ash. Diaz volunteered first, but McAllister shut him down. The kid could barely stand. Kim said he was too valuable with the transmitter in case anyone friendly ever showed up. That left McAllister and Dr. Tran staring at each other over the flickering lights. She shook her head before he even spoke. "I started this," she said. "I finish it." Alpha roared, charging down the corridor as McAllister dragged Diaz and Kim through the final blast door. Dr. Tran stayed behind at the controls, hands flying over panels while the pack leader and its soldiers swarmed closer. She triggered the lock, sealing the door between them with a clang of finality before hitting the incineration command. Fire rolled through the lower levels in a roar that drowned even the monster's screams. Heat seared through the metal as the prototypes, the soldiers, and Dr. Tran herself vanished in the blast. Alpha smashed against the sealed door once, twice, then fell silent as the core chamber collapsed in flames, taking half the mountain with it. When the surviving blast doors finally opened again, the tunnels behind were black and ruin. Nothing moved in the smoke but twisted metal and scorched stone. McAllister led the survivors out into the gray dawn over the peaks. Kim carried the dead transmitter like a tombstone, while Diaz limped beside him, silent for once. The wind scattered ash across the cliffs below where the jungle burned in patches from the night's fighting. Far above, streaks of light crossed the sky as ships finally approached from orbit, drawn by the emergency beacon and the research files broadcast hours earlier. Whether they brought rescue or more cover-ups, no one could say yet. McAllister watched them descend while the sun climbed over the horizon, turning the smoke gold. He knew the truth was out now, and Command would never control the story again, no matter how many soldiers or monsters they sent. Alpha and the others were gone. The prototypes were ash. But the galaxy had heard what happened on this planet, and nothing would bury it again. McAllister turned away from the rising sun, leading the last of his squad down the mountain toward whatever came next. The war was over here, but something told him it was only beginning everywhere else.